More good news for Insta360 X4 owners. As of the latest update, you have yet another remote control option, the GPS Action Remote. Stay tuned and let's check it out. Until a few days ago, if you wanted a dedicated remote for your Insta360 X4, the only option you had was the GPS Preview Remote, which comes in at a pretty hefty $150, which is quite expensive if all you're looking for is the ability to remotely start and stop recording and maybe change modes. Well, earlier this week, a new firmware was released for the X4, which makes additional options available, including the GPS Action Remote, which comes in at $80, still pretty expensive, but almost half the cost of the GPS Preview Remote, and this might be a better option if you're just looking for some basic functionality. So today we're going to take a closer look at the combination of the GPS Action Remote with the Insta360 X4. We'll also do a bit of comparison against the other options to see if this is the right choice for you. So today's video is going to be quite short, but I'll place the chapters up here so you can go straight to the section or sections you're most interested in. And importantly, before we get started, just to emphasize, this video is not sponsored, paid for, or influenced in any way. I purchased all of the equipment with my own money, and the opinions are entirely my own. If you check out the support pages of the Insta360 website, you will see that firmware version 1.2.21 is now released and available for download. And if you check out the details, among the many changes, you'll find two pretty significant remote control focus changes. Control from the Apple Watch, which is something that I reviewed on the channel just a few days ago, and the focus of today's video, control from the GPS Action Remote. Now, when it comes to doing the upgrade, the easiest way to do this, of course, is connecting your X4 to the Insta360 app. When you do so, it will now tell you that there is a new firmware version available, and it's simply a case of following the prompts to download the new firmware version and upload it to the camera. Okay, so let's just talk briefly about the design of the remote. I don't want to go into too much detail here because I did an in-depth review of this last year in combination with the X3, so check that video out for more details. Firstly, just a comparison of the size. Here you can see it alongside an X4, here alongside the GPS Preview Remote. And here, if we compare it to an Apple Watch, you can see it's pretty compact. We have a small monochrome screen here, which I think is big enough for most purposes. You have two buttons down the side. You've got a power button and a mode button. And then you have a nice large record button. I do like the fact they've separated this. And you have also a status LED up here. Again, that's nice because it shows you very clearly when the camera is recording. On the base, you can see we have behind this little rubber flap, we have USB-C for charging. And when the rubber flap is in place, this is IPX8 rated, waterproof to a depth of 5 meters, and I can definitely attest to that. I've taken this into the water on many occasions. Okay, so let's power on the remote by holding the power button. As you can see, it comes up on the settings page. We use the record button as a selection button. The first option is pair new, and we hit the record button again, and as you can see, it's now searching for a connection. On the camera, we now go over to here in the settings. You can see there's a little remote control, and when we hit that, it now starts the search on the camera for a remote. And here you can see it finds my GPS remote. And now we are connected. Now, as far as the settings are concerned, there's one more thing you may want to change. If you go into the settings and scroll down, you will find here Bluetooth wake up. Now, when you first connect the remote, I believe this gets activated by default, but in case not, you want to make sure this is on. That way you can actually power up the camera using the remote. Okay, let's talk about operating the camera using the remote. As you can see, both are currently powered off. Powering on the remote, we hold the power button. And once the remote is powered on, we can simply click the power button one time and it will wake up the camera again as long as that Bluetooth wake up is enabled. Now this does take quite a bit of time. It takes about 25 seconds from the time that the camera powers up to when it finally registers as having the remote connected and being able to operate the camera. So as you can see, now we are connected. Now the remote is pretty basic in its operation. The only thing you can do with it is change the mode, and there are actually only 4 modes that it supports. So right now it's in standard video. I'm going to change it. You can see it goes to time shift mode. From time shift mode it goes to loop recording. And from loop recording it goes to standard photo mode, and one more press takes us back to video mode. So only these 4 modes are available through the remote. Now you can select any mode you want on the camera itself, and that will also be shown on the remote, but you cannot select those modes using the remote. Of course, the other action you can do is starting and stopping recording. When you start a recording, one thing I really do like is this nice bright flashing red light that emulates exactly the flashing light on the camera itself, so it is very easy to see even at quite a distance that the camera is recording. And of course, when you stop, the light returns to blue. When you're done recording, you can power off the camera with the power button by holding it down. It will then power off the camera and the remote will stay on unless you continue to hold the power button, in which case it will also power down the remote. If you now want to power down the remote, you can simply hold the button. And as far as operating the camera is concerned, that's it. So let's talk about what's not so good about the GPS Action Remote. I think the first thing, something you saw earlier, is the wake up time. So when I wake up the camera, as you can see, it responds straight away and powers on, but there is a considerable time delay until I can actually use the remote and do anything on the camera. So only now am I able to actually operate the camera. The second thing, again you also saw this, is when you're using the mode button, you only get these 4 options. Now I can understand why they would want to limit this a little bit because the selection has become pretty overwhelming, but video, time shift, loop recording, and photo mode. Those are the only 4 modes that you have access to. Frankly, 4 modes is pretty limiting. What I would like to see is at very least the ability to customize this list for the modes that you use most frequently. And one more thing that is not so good, and that is if for any reason you remove the battery, whether it's to replace the battery or access the memory card, when you replace the battery, Bluetooth wake up no longer works. In order to re-establish the connection, you have to manually power on the camera, wait for the remote to connect. So they reconnect automatically at least. Now that the connection is re-established, I can power off the camera and Bluetooth wake works again. Okay, let's do a range test on the remote. I'm going to use the remote to simply change the mode, and I'm going to get further away from the camera, and you'll be able to see on the screen each time I hit the remote, you'll be able to see the mode change. I'm going to try at 30 feet and again at around 60 feet or around about the 20-meter mark, and let's see how that works out. Okay, so right now I'm about 30 feet away from the camera and I am pressing now and it is supposed to be now in the standard video mode. I press it again and it is supposed to be now in the time shift mode. Okay, and now at 60 feet away or around about 20 meters. Again, I'm pressing the mode and we are supposedly now in the photo mode. Pressing again and now we are in the video mode. Pressing again. And now we should be in the time shift mode. So as far as GPS performance is concerned, one thing to note first off, the GPS Action Remote, like pretty much any GPS device, needs good visibility to the sky in order to get the best performance. So if you are in a building, you are unlikely to get a good GPS signal. Even if you are in a vehicle, that signal could easily be compromised. So in order to get the best performance from the GPS Action Remote, it's always the best idea to keep it somewhere where it has good visibility to the sky. So with that said, there are two things that I tested for GPS performance. I tested the GPS signal acquisition time and also the overall accuracy of the GPS data. As far as GPS acquisition is concerned, this was pretty easy to test just by looking at the display, and I found on the GPS Action Remote it typically takes up to a minute to get a signal, which is a little slow I think by today's standards, but as long as you know that and you fire up your remote at least a minute or so before you actually want to get GPS data, you should be fine. Now, testing the accuracy is a little more challenging because in order to do it properly, you would need some kind of calibrated reference. Now, for my tests, I used the speedometer of my vehicle, but in all honesty, I cannot tell you which is more accurate, the GPS remote or the speedometer of my vehicle. So please take that into consideration. So in order to test the accuracy then, I simply took a drive and filmed the speedometer of the vehicle and superimposed the speed over the top of the resulting clip. And here, as you can see, in general, they are pretty much in sync. If anything, the GPS Action Remote's data is slightly ahead of my vehicle's speedometer. There are a couple of instances where you see the two go out of sync, but again, I cannot say for sure which one is the most accurate. So overall from these results, I think the accuracy from the GPS remote is pretty good, certainly good enough for hobby purposes like motovlogging, bike riding, running, whatever the case may be. So let's compare the GPS Action Remote to the other remote control options that are available for the Insta360 X4. Now, in this particular discussion, I am not going to talk about the Insta360 app. As good as it is, in many cases, it's just not practical to take out a smartphone and start swiping around on the screen, particularly if you are running, biking, surfing, skiing, whatever the case may be. So we're really just going to focus on the three remote control options: the Apple Watch, the GPS Preview Remote, and of course the GPS Action Remote. So let's start by first talking about the Insta360 app on the Apple Watch. Now, I don't want to go through all the details here. I just posted a review on the Apple Watch control a couple of days ago, so check that out on the channel if you want the full details. But compared to the GPS Action Remote, the Apple Watch actually provides a little more control over the functions of the camera. Firstly, it gives you access to all of the available recording modes, even the ability to switch between 360 and single lens modes, switch the lenses, and also change the resolution and frame rates. And of course, the biggest advantage of the Apple Watch app is, assuming you already own an Apple Watch, it's completely free and you basically already have it. But there are a number of key deficits in the Apple Watch app. Firstly, there is no ability to wake up the camera, and when the camera is connected to the app, it will not auto power off, both of which to me are a major disadvantage. Next, I would say the interface of the Apple Watch app is not really suited to action type situations. Firstly, you have to be able to actually look at the screen, you have to swipe around and navigate on the screen, and then you have to accurately hit the button that you want, which is not always that simple if you are running, biking, surfing, skiing, whatever the case may be. And also, in my experience with the Apple Watch, when that critical moment comes and you raise your wrist in order to start the recording, often you're confronted with a watch face, you have to then navigate your way to the app, maybe you have to enter a PIN code. Again, it's just not well suited to an action type environment. Next up, let's talk about the GPS preview remote. Now here too, I just posted a full review of this, so please check that out if you want all the details. But compared to the GPS Action Remote, this offers way more functionality and control over your X4. You have access to all the modes, all the parameters for those modes. You can even go into the settings for your recording, change your shutter speed, your color profile, your white balance, and so on and so on. Pretty much anything you would want to do using a remote control. Now, despite having so much functionality, I would say it's very easy to use, and it's also very action friendly because it has these two buttons on the top of the device itself for powering on and off the camera and changing modes, and a separate recording button. So it's actually very easy if you're running, biking, skiing, whatever, to just reach over and then hit the button that you want in order to carry out the action that you're looking for. And of course, the standout feature of the GPS preview remote, as its name suggests, is the fact that you have the full preview of what your camera is looking at. On an X4, you can even move this around and change the viewing angle, which of course is very impressive. But in all honesty, I think this is much more useful when you have a standard camera like an Ace or an Ace Pro. When you're using a 360 camera, of course, you're always looking in all directions all the time, and you do your reframing afterwards. So for an Insta360 X4, I'm not sure that's really necessary. Now, the GPS preview remote, however, does have a few downsides, not least of which, of course, is its hefty price tag, which in the US is $150. Now, don't get me wrong, considering all the capabilities this little thing has, I don't think $150 is that unreasonable. I just question whether most people need all that functionality. As an example, personally, when I go out filming, I set 360 video at 8K. All I really want to be able to do is power on and off the camera when needed and start and stop the recording. And for that, $150 is a lot of money. A couple of other negatives compared to the GPS Action Remote. Firstly, it is not waterproof, it is only water resistant. And also, one of the things that really annoys me about this device is that it has a proprietary charging cradle. There is no USB-C to charge this up. And that brings us to our GPS Action Remote. And I think Action Remote really is a good name for this device because I really think it hits a sweet spot when it comes to action-focused activities, whether it's running, biking, motorbiking, surfing, kayaking, skydiving, whatever the case may be. I think this meets the needs of those type of situations. The overall functionality is somewhat limited, but I think it covers 95+% of what most users need in a remote. You can power on and off the camera, you can change the modes, you can start and stop recording, and a quick glance at the remote very clearly shows you what your camera is currently doing. And you can access all of these features through dedicated buttons. You have a dedicated power button, a dedicated mode button, and a dedicated record button, which makes it very easy to just simply reach for this remote even if you can't see it and find the right button to do whatever it is you're trying to do. Other advantages it has, particularly compared to the preview remote, is that it is waterproof down to 5 meters, and also you have USB-C for recharging it. Now, in my testing, the battery on this lasts about 8 to 9 hours, which should be more than enough to get you through most days of recording. Now, a big negative for me on the GPS Action Remote is its price. When you look at what this thing can do, when you look at what it probably costs to manufacture, I have a hard time justifying $80 for this product. Now, if you make use of the GPS, maybe that might relieve the pain a little bit, but even then, I still think the price is too high. I would think that a price tag more in line with the original GPS remote, around $40 to $50, is a much more appropriate price point. So overall, I think it's clear that the new firmware and the new remote control options that it offers is definitely a positive step for Insta360 X4 owners. Being able to use the GPS Action Remote now gives you a more cost-effective alternative to the GPS Preview Remote, and even a free option if you already have an Apple Watch. Now, I am planning to do a more in-depth comparison of the different remote options for the X4, so definitely stay tuned for that one. If you have any questions, any comments, if you have suggestions for other future videos, please drop those into the comments section. And if you enjoyed the video and got good information out of it, please remember to give us a like and consider subscribing to the channel. This really does help the channel grow. Otherwise, thank you for watching.